Hi there, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on the SFIA Framework this afternoon or this morning, depending where you're joining us from. It's a collaboration between APMG, the SFIA Foundation and SkillsTX, and as I say, we're going to take you through the SFIA Framework, SFIA being Skills Framework for the Information Age. My name is Mark Constable. I'll be your host and moderator for the session, and it's a pleasure to be joined by three presenters today. So first of all, we'll be hearing from Richard Pharro, who's CEO here at APMG International, and he'll be doing a bit of scene setting around the challenges that organisations and industries face around digital and ICT and cyber skills. We'll then hear from Ian Seward, who's the General Manager at the SFIA Foundation, and Ian will take us through a little bit more detail of the framework itself, its features and key benefits. And last but not least, we'll hear from Matthew Burrows. Matthew's the President at SkillsTX. SkillsTX have worked closely with the SFIA Foundation for a number of years now, and they provide a lot of accredited training and consultancy services around SFIA. So Matthew will take us through a bit more detail on the benefits and options available to organisations and individuals. Before we get to our presenters, I'll just cover a bit of housekeeping. So the first point to note is we are recording the session today, and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email not too long after the webinar, as soon as we've got the recording online. And there'll be some additional information contained in that, so do look out for that. You're welcome to submit questions at any time throughout the session. I'll be keeping a close eye on those, and we'll be stopping periodically throughout, so we can take any questions submitted. Feedback is very welcome, so that helps us with planning and delivering webinars in the future. So feel free to share any feedback with me. You'll have my email address from reminder emails and the like. And something else to alert you to, it's not on the screen here, but we are running a couple of prize draws today for the webinar. Those will be happening towards the end. So do look out for those. Do stick with us for an opportunity to win some fantastic SFIA associated prizes. But I think that's the scene set. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Richard, who will get us started with a bit of scene setting. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome everybody to this webinar. I'd like, as Mark says, I'd just like to set the scene, because we've been working with the SFIA Foundation for a couple of years now, and we're quite interested in helping them to promote their approach to setting standards around skills, which is how we see SFIA. We've seen some changes in the market that I'll share with you that sort of thinks this is something that's become more important as time goes by. I'm delighted to be joined by Matthew and Ian, who are both experts on SFIA, so I can leave all the difficult questions and the technical stuff to them. But if you think about it, the world of work has really changed. You know, there's 5 industrial revolutions. But the key thing for me on this is how the time between one revolution and the next revolution has shortened from about sort of 90 to 100 years, and the last 2 being 2010 and 2020. So we don't know what the next revolution will bring us, but the chances are it's going to happen fairly soon. The chances are, though, that skilled people are going to be, sorry, could you go back a bit, Matthew? Skilled people are going to be much in demand. But how do we move beyond finding skilled people other than through personal recommendation? Yeah, and the pandemic's seen a major growth in hybrid working, people working from home. We've seen a growth in the gig economy, sort of people coming together to work on projects. A lot of those teams, though, are currently formed by personal recommendation. You know, how can we break out from that and actually have a much broader search for skills around the world that we might want to work on our project team? You know, whatever this next revolution is, I'm convinced that skills will be very prominent and skilled people will be in much demand. And as you can see on the next slide, you know, are skills actually replacing degrees? So, yeah, and it's an open question. The evidence suggests that they are, or not, maybe not replacing them, but certainly skills are becoming more important. And you can see some of the references on the slides where organizations, certainly in the US, are now looking for people with skills rather than degrees. And interestingly, during the pandemic, you know, when jobs became difficult to fill, employers started to look for people from a wider pool, people with skills and the right sort of attitude rather than necessarily the best education to fill those gaps. I think that's going to continue. I heard something on the radio today that said Boeing have a major problem in meeting their production cycles because they can't employ the right people. So how are they going to get the skilled technicians that they need in their organization if they're going to rely totally upon people with a graduate education? So I think this trend is with us and it's going to grow, and organizations will look for people with an organizational fit and the ability to train them, but they need that skills baseline on which to sort of build that wider capability. So if you look at some of the trends in skills-based hiring, these are sort of research that I've done sort of on the internet. So there's this concept of a structural reset where people are now, organizations are hiring on proven competency or proven skills. There's this cyclical reset where people are desperate to find the right people. So how are they going to find these right people to bring into their organization to help them move forward? And if we can do this, then there's huge benefits. Lowering these barriers means more people can engage in the workplace. Organizations can have more choice from anywhere in the world. People can move into higher paid jobs because they've got the capability rather than they went to the right college. And people that currently have those skills, but in a different industry, will be able to move from one industry to the next industry. And as this global search for talent steps up, this is likely to accelerate over the next few years. Moving on. So here's some research. It's probably biased by the researcher, but the argument is, organizations are now using skills-based hiring to find new talent. The problem I have with this, and the reason why we're supporting SFIA, is how do you know what one person considers to be an appropriate skill compared with what you may consider to be an appropriate skill? So consider the benefits of universal skill definition. Consider the benefits of one organization using that same definition and knowing somebody that has the skill that they understand and the skill that they want. And that could apply to any employee, whether they're permanent, whether they're temporary, whether they're a contractor in that gig economy. So think about the benefits of this global standard when thinking about the need to find people with an appropriate skill. And many organizations are now starting to embrace that approach. So, the value of digital credentials. We've been offering digital credentials for our qualifications for some time now. But the true meaning of a digital credential isn't the shiny badge that you can put on your webpage or the badge you can put on your LinkedIn profile. It's what the metadata behind it actually says, which actually demonstrates what the badge holder, what the credential holder has actually achieved, or what the credential holder actually knows. So if you can link digital credentials with a global standard on skills, then you open up huge possibilities, huge opportunities for both the employer and the person looking for work to find the right mix. And as I said earlier, to really start to help to drive the economies forward. Much more powerful with standard user-driven standards, user-driven definitions, and SFIA is about users and communities coming together to do these definitions, which we'll hear later from Ian. So moving on to digital credentials, there are lots of benefits both for the organization. I don't need to go through all 4 bullets, you can read those for yourself. And there's also lots of benefits for the individual that actually has this credential that proves what they can do, that they have done it, and enables them to move into the workplace. But if you think about it, for that to work around the world, for that to work for corporates with offices in different countries, maybe different standards in different countries of the workforce coming into the workplace, this global consistent standard that is applied fairly rigorously around the world could make a huge impact, make a huge difference to this trend towards skills-based recruiting, skills-based development. Skills that are vetted and verified through a digital credential, offer these individuals, huge opportunity. So my final slide is about SFIA digital badges. So within APMG, we've now mapped all of our qualifications against the SFIA framework, and we've identified what knowledge component we have in a credential, in a qualification or in a course, and where that maps to SFIA. There's also some things in there about sort of experience that people have that they can gain, when actually taking a course, if it's a practical type course. So if an employee, if anyone wants to gain the level of knowledge necessary for one of the SFIA skills, and I'll leave Matthew and Ian to explain how many they are and how they're broken out. Within APMG, we've now provided a roadmap to help them find the right course, to find the right qualification, to enable them to demonstrate their knowledge against the SFIA framework. That was my short introduction. I'd like to hand over to Ian, who can take you through the history of SFIA and what it is doing to sort of change the workplace. Thank you.
Thank
Ian.
you, Richard. Thank you. Matthew, move on to the first slide of mine, please. So I'm going to give a very, very brief introduction to SFIA. For those of you that have not seen SFIA before, it is just that, a brief introduction. For those of you that have seen SFIA before, it might be a bit of a refresher about why SFIA is the way it is and how it came about and how we operate, rather than the details within the framework itself. I know Matthew's going to mention some of those in his session. So next slide, please. Right, the SFIA Foundation itself. We found ourselves in this position. The SFIA Foundation was set up many years ago as a not-for-profit with altruistic aims, and we operate on a subsistence funding basis. Yes, there's a licensing model, but the vast majority of people all around the world who use SFIA do so through a free of charge license. We recently thought, what are we there for? We do that every now and again because the world moves on. But our purpose, currently stated, is to enable greater capability and capacity within the global digital workforce. And a major component of that is skills and competencies, and that's what we focus on. We have a number of strategic objectives, the first one of which is defined here. That is the active stewardship of the global skills and competency framework and its ecosystem, and we make no apology for this, to meet the needs of professionals and employers. We are an industry framework for industry, built by industry. And that's one of the strengths of SFIA, and that's one of the reasons why industry has chosen to take it up. Next slide, please, Matthew. So we know why we exist, but it's always worth revisiting that. We're not a framework for the sake of having a framework. On the left-hand side is an interpretation of the sort of things that organizations want to do. And we are there to enable them to manage their workforce better and to address the skills and competencies that they need, whether that's planning and organizing, creating a target operating model, job architectures, acquisition of skills, recruitment, whatever. Those HR, human capital development processes need a common basis. And what SFIA is a global common language to enable a consistent and integrated approach to those people development activities. So that's why we exist. We're very clear that we're there to solve those problems. The framework itself is described on the right-hand side in a very simple graphic of professional skills, behaviors in knowledge, and we recognize the value and use of certifications and qualifications. Because we are industry focused, because we are there for industry, we focus on what industry cares about, which is experience. So you have a skill, competency of a particular level of ability, levels of responsibility, due to the practice of that skill in a real world environment. Next slide, please, Matthew. So what is SFIA? SFIA is a framework. It defines the skills and competencies required by professionals who design, develop, implement, manage and protect the data and technology that power the digital world. SFIA is a straightforward 7-level framework. It brings together the professional skills and the behaviors and the knowledge necessary to operate within the real world environment. There are 7 distinct progressive levels of responsibility. and we focus very strongly on those levels of responsibility. They are characterized by 5 generic attributes such as autonomy, influence, complexity, business skills, behavioral factors, and knowledge. And within those generic attributes are these behavioral factors. There are 121 professional skills. The bottom of that graphic is the summary of those 121 skills. And it's probably that picture that those people who know of SFIA recognize and know us by. They are described at the levels they can be practiced at. SFIA itself does not describe the knowledge required. We're not, as a foundation, experts in all of the knowledge necessary for those skills. We rely on experts to provide that, and we link to currently 57 bodies of knowledge. So this is a complicated slide, but there are 3 takeaways to this, really. The first is, yeah, we were first published in the year 2000. That doesn't mean to say SFIA is a 22-year-old framework. We update every 3 years, and we have reliably done that. Our next release will be at the tail end of 2024, without fail. We do this reliably. We focus on open collaboration, and we are very keen to collaborate with anyone, and we rely entirely on our user base and experts in other fields that are interested in collaborating with us to ensure that SFIA is kept relevant and current for people to use. I mentioned it's built by industry for industry, and every release is an evolution of the past, and that's deliberate activity. We have become the global common reference model for skills and competencies. I won't say it was an objective 20 years ago. It's what has happened as a result of having now a global user base. And in order to support that global user base, we translate into 13 languages. There's a couple more on the go. We do a number of things to help support use of the framework. Next slide, please, Matthew. So for the purposes of what's about to follow, I just want to say a couple of things about assessment of skills and competencies. SFIA can be used in many, many different ways, and the assessment of skills and competencies is one of those ways. We recognize the value of doing internal skills assessments within organizations, but we also recognize the need for organizations to have some independence sometimes in that process. And so we have provided some guidance for this. From the point of view of SFIA and approved assessment schemes, we value 2 particular international standards, which happen to be very good ones, in our opinion. The first is to do with how assessments of skills and competencies is described, and that is ISO 24773. And any approved assessment scheme we require to align to ISO 17024, which is a standard for assessing individuals. And for the purposes of our assessment, to align with industry's interest in experience and competency, i.e. performance of a skill within a real-world environment, we have defined, in line with 24773, what knowledge means, what skill means, which is more like a proficiency and can be demonstrated in a controlled environment, and what competency means, which is applying the necessary knowledge and the skill in a real-world environment with full professional responsibility and accountability for your actions, and indeed the actions that of the people that you're responsible for. So we have deliberately set this up to reflect what industry is interested in, and SkillsTX and APMG collaborating to help bring this to the market. Next slide, please, Matthew. So before I quickly hand over to Matthew, if there is interest in SFIA, if you haven't come across it before, everything that we provide is open. It is available on the website. You can see the skills framework. You can see all the information and the resources around being able to use it, the guidance. If you wish to download the materials, you can do so. You will have to register. but you can find out about how SFIA works, how to use it. You can find the reference framework, and you can get the two summary sheets, which are proved to be the most attractive items because they're short and sweet and have most of the information on there that you will need. It's deliberately not telling you what the skills are and what the details of the skills are. There's a lot to SFIA. If people are interested in finding out more, then please contact me. Very happy to point people in the right direction. And with that, Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you, Richard, as well. So remember, as Mark reminded you, there are a couple of competitions at the end of my slide, so make sure you stay with us to the end and we'll take you through those. I'll give you a bit of background on some of the elements that are included there as well, and perhaps a little bit more detail around SFIA and how we assess. So I'm from SkillsTX. I also, as a volunteer, work with Ian and other people on the SFIA Foundation board and the Global Design Authority board. As Ian mentioned, SFIA is regularly updated, so we're already looking at SFIA version 9 for the end of next year. But SFIA version 8 is the current version. Just want to put a couple of slides of just that next level of detail from what Ian was talking about earlier. So he showed you that chart with the 121 skills that are in the framework. Those skills are organized into 6 categories, and I've just picked at random one of those 6 categories, happens to be delivery and operation, just to show you a bit on the structure of the framework. So you can see within that category, delivery and operation, there are 3 subcategories, and within the subcategories, you've got the names of the skills. Each skill has a unique 4-letter code. That's just a shorthand for lazy people like me that don't like writing long words. I can just write 4 letters and a number next to it, and everybody knows which skill I'm talking about and which level. And you can see on here that skills are not always described at all of the 7 levels within the framework. We only describe them at the levels at which they're found practiced in the real working world. So the first example on this chart, technology service management, APMG is the 4-letter code. That's described at levels 5, 6, and 7 because it's not the sort of skill that has level 1 type activity where you are following a predefined script, very simple step-by-step task under close supervision. So we only describe it at the levels that it's found practiced, and we review that each time we do new versions. So you find new skills sometimes, some consolidation, some expansion of skills across to new levels. Ian also mentioned the generic levels of responsibility, these responsibility characteristics or attributes: autonomy, influence, complexity, business skill, and knowledge. And this is where a lot of what some people refer to this as soft skills. There's nothing really soft about them. They're hard won and very critical, but behavioral factors is probably a better description. And I've just, as an example there, shown you the text behind level 1. Now, each of these 5 characteristics have a description at each of the 7 levels in the framework. So that just gives you a next level of detail. Also, I've picked one of the 121 professional skills in the framework, just to give you an example. They all have the same structure, so a name, a 4-letter code. Then we have a very short overall description, in this case for digital forensics, recovering and investigating materials found in digital devices. We have a set of guidance notes, which give you a bit of context about that skill. And then we have a description for each of the levels at which that skill is found practiced. So if you're into digital forensics, if that's part of your skill set, you may find that you practice a skill at 1 level. You might practice it at more than 1 level as part of your normal pattern of work. So you can see level 3, supporting the investigations, level 4, designing them, processing them, analyzing them, level 5, conducting or leading them, collating conclusions and making recommendations, plus starting to contribute to the policies and standards for how digital forensics happen in the organization. And at level 6, this is less hands-on with doing all of the digital forensics investigations, and it's more focused on setting the policy standards and guidelines for how all digital forensics would happen across the organization. So a job may require this skill at one level or more than one levels. A person may have this skill at one or more levels. So that's enough of a lesson on SFIA. Obviously, as Ian said, there's a lot of material available to get you into a bit more detail on how to use it, but hopefully that gives you a quick overview of the structure. So the first question, why do we need to do anything about skills and competencies? Rich has given us some good arguments and reasons for that at the beginning. And really just to add to that, I would say that definitely technology has become increasingly important to pretty much every organization in all industries. But actually, despite the advances in technology, no matter how clever we are with the technology, with us all talking about things like ChatGPT and AI and things like that, actually, we're still completely dependent on having the right people with the right skills and competencies. It's not all automated yet. You know, you need people to gather the requirements, design the solutions, build them, operate them, and so on. So, of course, with that demand growing, it's a great place to be. If you're an individual working in the digital and IT space, there's lots of opportunity. And of course, if you're an employer, that means there's a challenge in holding on to your best people if they don't see a future for themselves in your organization. People might be attracted by a better perceived opportunity elsewhere. And when you look at the industry reports around why people leave, the biggest reason remains a perceived lack of career development opportunities. So that's one of the challenges for organizations. We've got to pay attention to our people, their skills and competencies, building them, maintaining them, recognizing them, and showing them a career path within the organization so that we can hold on to the best people. There are some critical components and vital ingredients for doing this. And SFIA provides number one in this step. We need a common language for describing skills and competencies. Otherwise, we can be talking at cross purposes and not have a common set of definitions. That's the critical role that SFIA plays, giving us that dictionary, that set of standard definitions. But then what do we do with the framework? Whether we're looking at it as an individual or we're thinking about it from our organization, it's a bit like navigation. To plot any route, you need to know where you're starting from. So that's often the first thing that we do, which is answer the what skills do we have question. So SFIA can be used to assess the skills we have so we know where we are right now. But then again, with any journey, you've got to see where you need to go to next. So thinking about what skills do you need. Now that might be short term. It might be what skills do I need this week? What skills do I need for a sprint next week? What skills do I need for a project that's starting next month? What are the skills I need for my current role? Or it could be slightly longer term where you think, okay, what skills do I need to be looking at for my next step in my career path? Or that new service we've got going live next year? Or the vision that we have for 2030 or whatever it might be. So there are different views, but essentially it comes down to these two key data sets. What skills do we have? What skills do we need? And we recognize that both of those are changing much more rapidly than they ever used to. People develop new skills through the experience that they have through completing development activities as well as real work. So they need to be able to not just capture their current skills, but they need to be able to easily update their skill profiles as well. Equally, we need to be able to update our skill requirements. Gone are the days of 10 years ago where you could write a job description and be fairly confident that that job description would be static for the next 5 or 6 years. That's just not the reality these days. As Gartner say, they estimate that the skill requirements for a job change at least 10% each year. So if your job descriptions have been sitting there in a folder on SharePoint for the last 5 years and you haven't reviewed them, they're probably, half of it's wrong. Yeah, so you've got to have an easy way of keeping that up to date as well. And as long as you've got good, reliable data for those two data sets, what do we have, what do we need, you can then do the gap analysis for various scenarios, whether that's as an individual looking at your current role, future role, or whether it's looking across your team saying, do we have the capabilities we need for this change that's going to happen? Or whether it's at government level. I'm working with a lot of governments around the world who are rolling this up and looking at it across the whole country and using it to make decisions and decide what their plans are for education and how they prepare people for the world of work. So this is multi-level stuff. So most organizations, though, there is a challenge. They've got a view on what skills they think they have. My experience of doing this over the last 20 plus years is that when they actually assess what skills they really have, it's always slightly different from what they thought. There are positives in that. They confirm known usable capability skills they thought they had. They do have them. They've confirmed that, that's okay. They also, if you do this right and you assess each person for all of their skills and not just the subset of skills that are in their current job description, you will be pleasantly surprised and you will find skills you didn't know you had within the organization. And those skills, now that you know where they are, you can make use of them. And that might actually mean that you can give people internally a better opportunity rather than looking outside as your first step. You will also find some risks you didn't know about, some danger areas, skills that you thought you had, it turns out you don't have them. And it is best to know that as early as possible, because if you know that risk is there, you can take some action, whether that action is to develop the skills in existing people, recruit, hire from outside, borrow from a third-party vendor, whatever it might be. You need the data in order to actually make a well-informed decision on next steps. So that's effectively what we end up doing with most organizations and individuals, answering initially those first two questions: what skills do we have, what skills do we need? And then using that data, keeping it up to date to help with these sorts of decisions. Build, what training do we put people on? How do we get best bang for our buck on our training budget? Which items in our learning management system are going to best fit the skill needs of an individual? And the mapping that organizations like APMG have done, where the whole of their catalog is mapped to SFIA, helps people to get on the right training, the right certifications, and really make sure they don't waste any time in that development journey. Because if they have project management at level 4 and they need project management at level 5, it's going to point them towards the right one. It might be the practitioner level rather than the foundation, for example. So that mapping is really important and really helpful in helping to have a good development plan. Sometimes you find you've got the skills, but they're not necessarily in the place you expected to find them. So now you know who's got them, you can mobilize those and use those within your organization, even if it's just for shadowing and coaching and mentoring of somebody else that needs to develop that skill, or if it's allocating that person to a particular task. Of course, you can use SFIA in recruitment as well. And the first thing that SFIA does for us in recruitment is helps us to describe the skills we need in a much better way, a way that everybody will understand because of the international use of the SFIA framework across nearly 200 countries. But of course, sometimes we will make a decision that actually we want to not have those skills in-house as core competencies internally, but perhaps we might want to source those externally from contractors, contingent workers, suppliers, vendors. And there's a lot of organizations making really good use of SFIA in expressing their requirements and then comparing different suppliers against each other. So there's a lot you can do with the SFIA framework. Couple of cartoons just to lighten the mood. If you haven't seen these, the Has Been series are on the SkillsTX.com website. So if you like cartoons, they've all got a good story behind them, and a lot of them come from real conversations that I've had. And one of the things that people worry about is sort of some biases that creep into our processes, particularly like recruitment, where you're looking at the potential candidates for a role and somebody saying, oh, I don't think I know them, you know, how old are they? You know, oh yeah, that person supports the same football team as me, we ought to interview them. It's not a good basis for selecting the right candidate. You know, if you've got a skills inventory of your organization, if you are assessing candidates, you can actually be much more objective, a lot fairer, and remove a load of those biases that otherwise could be within that process by focusing on that skills. What are the skills we need? Have they got the skills? How close are they to the requirement? So that, in essence, is that skills-based recruitment, skills-based hiring that Richard mentioned earlier. We also have some organizations that think they've done enough in this space because they've got their high-level, general, generic HR platform with some sort of skills database within it. And what I often find is that actually that is too high level to be really useful when we're trying to manage the specialisms. I know one of the leading HR systems has only got room for 7 skills at 4 levels. And as Ian already described, we've got 121 skills and we've got 7 levels in our framework. And we need that level of detail in order to make a distinction between different specialisms. That's the level of detail we need to manage at. Otherwise, you end up with this situation where people say, have you got project management? Yes or no. Have you got service management? Yes or no. Great. You don't need a development plan because you've got everything you need. We just know it's not as simple as that. So often organizations that are doing well in this space are still carrying on with using their HR systems and for the good things that they do, but having to partner that up and maybe integrate that into a more detailed system to manage at the detailed level of SFIA. Also really important, we've had a bit of a challenge in our industry, I think, over a number of years where we focus perhaps too much just on knowledge. Knowledge is really important, and certainly part of people's development journey is often starting with the knowledge. You go on a training course, you get the theory, you understand the theory, you think about and understand how it would be applied. But on its own, that knowledge can be dangerous, and you do need to recognize in your development plan other actions. So your first action might be get the knowledge, but then your next action will be, where have I got the opportunity to put that knowledge into practice in a working environment, maybe with some shadowing, coaching, maybe in some simulated environment, maybe working alongside somebody who's already got that experience to get that transfer and to start becoming proficient in that skill. And then going on to once you've done something so many times, you might complete your development and be fully professionally competent in a skill at a particular level. And then your focus is in that skill at a higher level or in a different skill. So knowledge is important, definitely not dismissing that, but actually most people stop at knowledge and they end up finding out a few challenges. And really, we need to be a bit more grown up in our development plans and start putting other actions that take us beyond knowledge. I'm going to skip over this one in the interest of time. So looking at this from an individual perspective, so where do you start as an individual professional in this space? My recommendation is that you start by answering that what skills do we have question for me as an individual. So what you'll all be able to do, and we'll give you a link towards the end of this presentation, everybody can go online and use our tool to create their own SFIA-based skills profile. So self-assessment as a starting point. So it will take you somewhere between 10 minutes and 1 hour typically to do a skill profile. It just depends on your experience level. If you're still in university, you're new to the world of work, it'll be nearer 10 to 15 minutes. If you're a 20-year veteran, guess what? You've got more skills, so it's going to take you a little bit longer, but typically 45 minutes to an hour. That's a one-off activity. That gives you your baseline. Where am I now? you never have to repeat that self-assessment process, because with that baseline, you can update it and keep it up to date as your skills change over time. So that's a really good starting point. Do the self-assessment, have a SFIA-based skill profile. What you'll then be able to do is to compare your skill profile with a number of templated roles, all of the SFIA views, a number of industry occupation lists and profiles that are embedded into the SkillsTX tool and also visible on the SFIA Foundation website. You can compare your skill profile with those industry profiles and start exploring skills that you might want to develop. Start creating your action plan for what are you going to do next. So as an individual, that's a really good starting point. If you're doing this across your organization, it's a similar process. Everybody does this because, of course, the combined set of skill profiles provide the organization with their skill inventory. So it's part of the same process. But of course, within your organization, rather than just looking at industry role templates, you would define the roles, jobs, and other skill requirements that are specific to your organization, and therefore have a more tailored and structured action plan that's relevant to your organization as well as you as an individual. So that's a good starting point. As I say, it's applicable to people, even if you're still in education. Lots of university students do the self-assessment so they can explore potential career paths, and helps them to give them a bit of focus and to explore areas that they might be interested in. But it's useful at all stages of your professional journey. I've included in the slides a few of those definitions for how do we assess skills, and these are built into the self-assessment, but they're also built into the way that we as SFIA accredited assessors assess an individual if we're doing an independent assessment of them. So it's just as a shorthand, knowledge is about understanding and being able to explain how you would do something. Skill proficiency is when you've done it enough times that you can achieve some level of proficiency, and competency, significant professional experience where you are fully professionally competent and your focus is now shifting to that skill at a higher level or a different skill. So all of that terminology is very much aligned with these ISO standards, as Ian mentioned, and that helps with the consistency and the acceptance globally. And within the scheme that we have built with the SFIA Foundation, with APMG, with others, there's a number of different levels. They mentioned the knowledge, skill proficiency, and competency badges. We also eat our own dog food, as the expression goes. Here we use it within the SFIA Foundation for awarding competency badges for SFIA accredited practitioners, assessors, and consultants. So it's used in a number of different ways across the foundation scheme. I won't bore you with the details. What we're focusing on here for individuals is this category B. If we think about individual professionals, it's about how SFIA describes the skills and competencies they have, and providing that recognition for whether it's knowledge, skill proficiency, or competency that they have achieved. So we have a really clear set of criteria that all SFIA assessors will follow, so that we can get a consistent answer, no matter whether it's me assessing you or another SFIA assessor elsewhere around the world. So the typical approach tends to start with that same self-assessment process. It's useful for individuals to really understand where they think they are, so that's always a good starting point. If you want to go beyond self-assessment, then this is where the assessment scheme can really help you. You can, once you've got your skill profile, you focus in on perhaps sort of 6 core skills that you have within the framework. So you identify those core specialisms, and you can then apply to have your evidence of your capability and your experience assessed. Usually that's done through a 1-hour online or face-to-face assessment with a SFIA accredited assessor. We talk about your skills and experience. We see what you've really done, not just the theory, and go through your background. And then we can make a decision on which badges, which digital credentials can be issued, and then those can be issued through the platform. And you can then use those in a number of ways. Use them internally so that people can recognize the skills and the competencies that you have. A lot of people use it almost as a replacement for their CV or resume, a skill wallet, if you like. Here are my core specialisms. These are the core things that I have. And if you imagine having this sort of profile as an individual, it's really going to help to explain to people what you do and what your core focus is. And obviously backed by the rigor that we have within the SFIA Foundation scheme and the APMG scheme for assessment. And one of the draws that we're doing is going to give you a chance to have a session with a SFIA assessor to look at your experience and to issue you with up to 6 badges for your core competencies. So stay tuned for that. We'll explain a bit more in a moment. I'm going to skip over these. I'm going to just talk about this from an organizational perspective. So talk a little bit about an individual perspective. If you're thinking about this on behalf of your organization, how good are we at managing skills and competencies and retaining people, developing them, and so on? We have a really quick assessment available called the Digital Skills Management Maturity Assessment. It's completely free. It'll take you somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes to do, and it will gather a bit of information about what you do now, tell you where you are on the scale, give you a bit of SWOT analysis on moving from where you are to other levels so you can decide where you want to be. And then it will give you a lot of guidance on how to take those first steps and get to where you need to. So I'm going to give you the links for those. We have a landing page QR code towards the end of the slide pack, so that you can go in and get a bit more information, and you can register for that free DSMM assessment and get that report, which will help your internal discussions about next steps. If you want to learn a bit more about SFIA, we are SFIA accredited training providers as well. There's some information on the SFIA website. There's also a set of accredited training courses. So when you get a copy of these slides, you'll have all these links and QR codes, which will help you to do those. I'm going to show you this slide again in a moment after we've gone through the competitions, but just so I put them on the screen now, just so you know what we're going to show you. So there's a QR code on the left for individuals. So that will give you a bit of a background on why SFIA is useful to you as an individual, and give you the link so that you can register to do your own SFIA self-assessment. The one on the right will give you a bit of information from an organizational perspective and the link to assess using that Digital Skills Management Maturity Assessment. And the one in the middle is just some general information about SFIA. So that's the codes there. And Mark, I think I'm going to sort of hand over to you to talk us through the polling process for the first prize.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. Certainly. So the first prize, this is on behalf of your organisation. So a 1-hour session with a SFIA accredited consultant. So what we need to do, just to confirm you want to take part in these draws, if you should be able to see a poll on screen now. So if you just let us know yes or no if you want to take part in that draw, and we'll conduct those draws shortly after the webinar and get in touch with the winners soon after.
Excellent. So that's the first poll, which is for you thinking about your organization, and we'll take you through that assessment, but you'll have an hour with a SFIA accredited consultant to really plan next steps, answer your questions, and really start to build a plan, a roadmap for what you do next.
That's great. I can see 100% voted, so that's great. We'll close that one down. And
then I'll switch on to the next one then. So the next one is we have 5 individual assessor sessions available. So this is for you thinking about your own career development, your own skill profile. having a 1 hour session with a SFIA accredited assessor who will talk through your experience and decide which badges, which digital credentials can be awarded to you, and you'll have those awarded and be able to use those to share on social media, to have within your evidence section of your skill profile, and to use it in whichever way will be most useful. So it's 5 of those to be won. So I think Mark's just put the poll up for that.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Same thing again. Just let us know if you want to take part in that draw, and yeah, we'll contact winners soon after the webinar. And again, I can see 100% of the vote, so thank you very much. Close that one down as well. And to questions. So we've got a few questions to go through. The first one actually goes back to the digital badges. So is the badge still, in inverted commas only, a confirmation of a taught skill rather than an applied skill?
No, it's not just a confirmation of a taught skill. The knowledge badges are used for that. So if we assess that you have just the theoretical knowledge, that would be the equivalent of attending a training course and being taught the theory, then that's what the knowledge badge is for. But then the next step up is that skill proficiency badge, which says that you've applied that knowledge in a real environment and actually done what SFIA is describing to the point where you've become proficient. You can do it on your own without instruction, and you can achieve good, consistent results through doing it. So that's skill proficiency. So that effectively includes knowledge. So it's knowledge and applying that knowledge and becoming proficient. The next level up is that competency badge. So all the red badges are significant professional experience. So you've applied that knowledge, you've got beyond pure proficiency, you've got to the point where you're fully professionally competent in that skill. You've completed your development in that skill at that level. So it's not just taught knowledge. That's why we have those 3 levels.
Thanks, Matthew. I can imagine your answer to this one. Would you advise IT teams to mention SFIA levels in job descriptions?
Yes, absolutely. Being able to be clear about what the job entails is really important. More important than the level numbers, though, are the descriptions. And SFIA has got descriptive text about what do you actually do. It's all activity based and very much a focus on experience. So definitely within your job descriptions, they should be SFIA based job descriptions that clearly show which skill at which level or levels, if they require someone to perform a skill at more than one level, anyone performing that role would need to do. And that way people can very easily compare their skill profile with that SFIA-based job description or role profile and see how well suited they are, see what gaps they have, what development opportunities, and so on.
Great, thanks, Matthew. Following on from that, there's who vets the proficiency and competency?
Yeah, so the scheme is sort of overseen, if you like, by the SFIA Foundation. I don't know whether you want to jump in. You did mention a couple of things about it, Ian. But
yes, the reality is many people already use SFIA for assessments, and that's a good thing, and we do not want to stop it in any way. We positively want to encourage that. However, in some instances, people want to be able to talk about that and in effect use the SFIA logo in some form of public recognition of that. And in order to do that, we wish to see what we call approved schemes, and that means that there are a number of requirements we expect those schemes to meet, and provided a SFIA partner organization meets those requirements, they can use those forms of logos within the assessments that they perform. As I say, that's exactly what APMG and SkillsTX have done, and that is available to others if they want to do so.
It's quite a tightly defined scheme. There's lots of rules in there. If you're assessed, you will be assessed by somebody who's been trained and accredited as a SFIA assessor. So it's only accredited assessors that can make that judgment under the scheme and actually decide which badges can be issued. Richard, you're the expert in doing this in a number of different areas, so you may have something to add.
No, I think you've explained it very well, Matthew. It is about rules and regulations laid down by the foundation that one has to adhere to, one has to demonstrate that adherence. And it comes back, I suppose, to my comments about the more people who subscribe to the SFIA Foundation scheme and demonstrate adherence to those standards, then the more consistent those standards are applied, and therefore the greater that value. Otherwise, you end up with SFIA in name only, and it loses the tremendous value that it has, as you guys have explained about the number of skills there are, the levels, and true application of those actually helps us grow a global workforce. One question for you, Matthew, that you mentioned, and not all skills are cumulative, are they? You have skills at one level. So could you just explain that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so SFIA, because it describes a skill at multiple levels. Let me use an example. I use incident management as an example. It's probably one that's quite well known to most people. We have a description for incident management levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you think about your average service desk manager, where they're perhaps not massively hands-on, they're probably not picking up the phone and logging cases themselves. They probably spend most of their time making sure the process is operating, supervising the people on the service desk. They would be practicing that incident management skill at level 5. If you are a service desk analyst where you're picking up the phone, prioritizing, categorizing, logging the case, you're probably doing what SFIA is describing at level 2. So some people with that skill at level 5 will have come from the background where they've worked their way through and they have that. They've worked on a service desk, they've executed that skill at level 2, level 3 where they resolve it, level 4 where they do more investigation, and then become level 5. But that's not necessarily the case. I know lots of service desk managers who are professional managers. They haven't necessarily come from that service desk background, so their experience might only have that skill at level 5, and that might be absolutely what's required for the role. So the advice that we give from the foundation guidance is treat each skill at a level as a separate thing. And the advice I give when I'm doing the training is if you're assessing yourself, capture all of the levels that are applicable to you. And if you're writing a job description or role profile, include all of the levels that somebody would need to practice that skill at as part of their normal working model.
Thanks, guys. I think just time for one final question before we move on to wrap up. There's a couple of questions around how different organisations would use it. It's quite a contrast. So the first one is an organisation size of 12,000 internal and 8,000 external. So where would they start? And then the second sort of related question, is it suitable for smaller charities who tend to have no budget for these type of things?
Yeah, I can definitely cover both of those. So I have an organisation, a college in Switzerland that have 7 people in their IT department, and they get real great value out of using the framework, assessing the people doing the development plans and so on. There's no limit in terms of how small you go. It can be useful to one individual in their development planning, small departments and so on. At the other end of the scale, larger organizations, we're working with some with tens or hundreds of thousands of people that have SFIA related skills and competencies. Where do you start? There are a few options. There's no one true answer, but the most common approach I find, and we're doing this with one multinational, I was working with them yesterday on this, they've started with a pilot group. So they've actually picked one team or one area. 50 to 100 people, I think, was in the first tranche. Do it with that group. Use that to fine tune your communication and how you do it in your adoption and your awareness, and then spread it out to other groups. Another good approach is actually start with the management layer. if the CIO and all of their direct reports are doing it, it sends out a really good signal to everybody of how important this is and how you're going to use SFIA throughout the organization for your decision making. It also educates that management layer in what it's about, and they can then help their direct reports when it comes to the next phase, which might be their direct reports and their teams.
Great, thanks, Matthew. I think we can move on to the final slides.
Okay. So second to last slide, just those QR codes for people to you point the cameras out at, and whichever ones are interesting to them. If you have any problems getting hold of these, of course, you can go to the APMG website. There's some pages on there. You can search for SFIA. You can make contact with myself or Ian as well if you've got a more general question. So there's those QR codes. Mark, do you want me to move on to the last slide? Just with the links?
Yes, please. Yeah, and just to say to that as well that we will include all these links in the follow-up email as well. So that if you haven't been quite able to scan those codes, don't worry, you will get them in the follow-up email. And I think that's about it, isn't it? So so do look out for that follow-up email. We'll conduct the prize draws. So good luck for the prize draws as well. So it just leaves me to thank everyone for attending today. So thank you, Matthew, Ian, and Richard, for your contributions. Thank you everyone for attending. Hope it's been an interesting session for you, and what's your appetite to find out more about the SFIA framework. So thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you again on future webinars. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks.